Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. I've come to this today. I wanted to discuss the issue of why we are stuck in Zimbabwe. When it comes to political discussion, it seems to me that we are stuck. We can never raise the discussion about personality. Some people are failing to understand the difference between a party or an individual and the nation. When you are discussing an issue that affects the nation, you have to rise above the individual party interest. It is imperative you do that. And yet we seem to be stuck in that groove where we cannot rise above personality. This is a typical comment I've been getting over and over again. This is one individual commenting. You, Mkonori, think you know better. I think that's what he wanted to say. If CCC, a party that was formed yesterday, failed, why can't you form your own party and show everyone how it's done? Mkonori should not just rant and waffle as if he has a solution. I challenge him to show Zimbabweans that is better than Chamisa. Otherwise, he should shut the hell up. You can't attack someone if you have no solution. That sentiment can only be expressed by somebody who really doesn't understand what the issues are. What I have said, and I'll say it again, is that MDC and Triple C were elected by the people of Zimbabwe for a very specific purpose. That purpose was that the opposition must implement the democratic reforms necessary to take the country from where we are, that is in the late 1990s, where we want to go. By the late 1990s, many Zimbabweans had realized that as long as Zanu PF is able to rig the elections, the country was going nowhere. So the primary purpose of the opposition was that they should bring about the democratic changes necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. If we look at the 2023 elections, Zanu PF blatantly rigged the elections. And so you cannot pretend that MDC, Triple C have carried out what they were supposed to do. They had a set task to carry out, implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. After 23 years, they have not implemented even one token reform. And hence the reason why Zanu PF was able to blatantly rig the elections. The individuals like the one I've just read out there are the ones who were conned into participating in last year's elections. They believed Chamisa when he said Triple C was going to win big. That he, Chamisa, and plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. They believed him. And even now, with the benefit of hindsight, they do not even have the common sense to say, no, we were cheated there. This is not about Chamisa. This is about Zimbabwe. If we want to get out of the economic and political hole that we find ourselves in, we have got to understand what needs to be done. And I believe we had understood what needed to be done. We need to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That is what needed to be done and what still needs to be done. It has not been done. The MDC have failed to implement even one meaningful reform. And hence the reason why we are in this mess. To fail to understand that is absolutely at the heart of our problem. This is not about Chamisa. This is not about Triple C. This is about Zimbabwe. Where do we want to go as a nation? Blind loyalty to Chamisa should not be done at the expense of the country. But that's exactly what we are seeing here. And I think the failure to rise above that mediocrity is at the heart of why we are stuck. The Greek philosopher Socrates said strong minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, weak minds discuss people. We have got a political system that has failed to deliver freedom, justice, and hope to our people. We have to lift that discussion to the ideas of how are we going to get to dismantle this failed system and replace it with a working system. But if all we are discussing here are individuals, Nelson Chamisa, and our blind loyalty to him is such that we cannot even see that even after 23 years in the opposition, including 5 in the GNU, they failed to implement even one token reform to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Then we've got a problem. Because whether we like it or not, as long as Zanu PF retains the carte blanche powers to rig elections, they will rig elections and they will stay in power. And as long as they stay in power, all these other problems of gross mismanagement, rampant corruption, and tyrannical oppression will remain. This is not about removing Chamisa and this Triple C, or rather being faithful to Chamisa no matter what. This is about what is good for Zimbabwe. And what is good for Zimbabwe right now is that we should elect a competent opposition that will implement the democratic reforms necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That is the number one priority for the country. And if you cannot see what is it we want, where we want to go, and all you can think about is your blind loyalty to an individual, that is truly tragic. There are individuals out there, whether we like to admit it or not, who are so faithful to Chamisa. It's reached a point of a personality cult level where he cannot do not, he can do nothing wrong. And these people are so loyal to him. They want everybody else to follow the same blind loyalty to Chamisa. If Chamisa and company fail to implement even one meaningful democratic reform in 23 years, including 5 in the GNU when they had the best chance to implement those reforms, then we need to elect others who would implement those reforms. It is that simple. This is not about Chamisa. This is about Zimbabwe. What is good for Zimbabwe? But clearly, there are some people whose allegiance to an individual has reached the point where they cannot be asked, they cannot rise above that to discuss the national interest, what is good for the country. And this is why we are stuck. To go back to that individual who are saying that Wilbert should shut up, I think actually it's the other way around. People who cannot or who do not have the intellect to discuss, to rise above blind loyalty to an individual or a party are the ones who should shut up. For the last 43 years, we have actually been fighting Zanu PF zealots who believe that because Zanu PF fought the war of liberation, they have the divine right to rule the country. And because the regime was in power, it has abused its position in power to stifle meaningful debate in the country, harass, jail, and even kill some of its political opponents, all for the purpose of keeping Zanu PF in power. Unlike the individual who was calling for Wilbert Mkonori to shut up, Zanu PF has the political muscle to silence its critics. But that is, again, another problem we have here. We need to move away from that. Those who want blind loyalty to individuals or a party have set the political agenda for the nation these last 43 years. We need to wrestle that from them. I think the national political agenda should be set by those who have got the intellect to see the national interest beyond the individual or party interest. Those who, the weak minds, as Socrates would put it, should not be the ones who set the national agenda. We want people who discuss the ideas, what would be best to move the country forward. Not those who are only interested in discussing what would be best to keep Mnangagwa in power or Chamisa in power. The interest of an individual or the party should never, ever be placed above the interests of the nation. The ideas should count more than the events. The ideas should count more than the individual. We have got a mountain of evidence already in the last 23 years to show that Nelson Chamisa and his fellow MDC Triple C friends are corrupt and incompetent. And for anyone to turn a blind eye to that political reality and go to the extent of even thinking that somebody like Nelson Chamisa is infallible, just beggars belief. Shows how much some people have really sunk. If you believed he was a demigod in 1999, before he had ever got into power, one could forgive that. But given the opposition's track record, after 23 years, including 5 in the GNU, they failed to implement even one reform. They are the ones who have been participating in these flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. And it's not as if they don't admit it. They admit it themselves. And still some people refuse to see that reality and still want to see them as infallible gods. That level of blind loyalty is what is holding the nation back. Think about it. Thank you very much for listening and good night.